Hello everyone, this is Jess from the Estevan Public Library, and happy spring! To celebrate, we will be making our own egg dyes out of simple ingredients you can find at the grocery store. Each of these ingredients will create its own color of dye, so feel free to use all of them or only some of them. For this project, you will need some eggs, some vinegar, ground turmeric for yellow dye, chili pepper for orange dye, black tea for brown, grape juice for lavender, fresh or frozen beets for pink, blueberries for dark blue, red or purple cabbage for light blue. If you want to add some more decorations to your eggs, you can also use a wax crayon or some small flowers, herbs, and greenery, sheer tights cut into 5-inch pieces, and some string or rubber bands. You will also need enough containers to hold the dye and eggs in once everything is ready. Let's get started! To hard-boil your eggs, place them in a pot of water. Place that pot on a hot element and bring the water to a boil. Once it's boiling, cover the eggs and turn off the heat. Leave the eggs sitting there on the warm element for 10 to 12 minutes. Once they're cooked, carefully remove the water and run the eggs under cold water until they're cool to the touch. While your eggs are cooking, we'll get some of the dye ingredients prepped. For your pink dye, you will need 2 cups of chopped or grated beets and 2 cups of water. For your blue dye, you will need 2 cups of shredded or red or purple cabbage and enough water to cover it by an inch. For your dark blue dye, you will need 2 cups of crushed blueberries and 2 cups of water. Alternatively, you can also use blueberry tea. You will need 1 cup of water for every bag you use. Once your items for the pink, light blue, and dark blue dye is ready, place them in some pots and cover with the recommended amount of water. Place the pots on the stove and bring each item to a boil. Once they're boiling, turn down the heat, cover them, and let them simmer from 20 to 50 minutes or until the desired color is reached. You can check on the coloring of the dye by using a spoon to lift some of the water. I'm going to let mine sit for about 30 minutes. For the next batches of dye, you can use our stovetop method, or you can use boiling water from the kettle. For a brown dye, use 1 cup of water for every tea bag you use. I'm using 2 cups of water, so I'll use 2 tea bags. To make a yellow dye, use 2 tablespoons of turmeric powder and 2 cups of water. For an orange dye, use 2 tablespoons of chili powder and 2 cups of water. Make sure these spices are well dissolved in the water before using them as dye. I found using the stovetop method made it much easier to dissolve the spices. To make a purple dye, use grape juice or grape juice concentrate for a darker color. You can add this directly into the container you'll be using to hold the eggs. Once the dye from the stovetop is ready, place some fine strainers on top of the containers you'll be using to hold your eggs. Pour the dye and the items through the strainer to separate the bigger pieces from the dye. Do this very carefully as your water will still be hot. Once you are finished, set all your dyes aside until they are cool. Once they're easy to handle, they're ready to use to dye eggs. Before we place our eggs into the dye, this is the chance to add some extra decorations to them. You can do this in a couple different ways. First, you can add the decorations by using a wax crayon to draw on a pattern, or you can use some string or some rubber bands, and place them around the egg to give it a stripe. There we go. You can also use string or bigger elastics to add multiple stripes. You can also add some floral patterns to your eggs by using herbs, small flowers, and small stockings. First, you'll cut up your stockings into 5-inch pieces, and then take one end, pull it tight, and then make a knot as you would with a balloon. So you tie one end around your finger, pull it out, and push the other end inside. Then pull tight, so you have a little knot at the very end. Find your other end and open it up. And grab your egg and some herbs. I'm going to use some parsley for this. And place it flat against your egg so that it will leave an impression when it's in the dye. Once it's in a position you're happy with, grab your stocking and carefully place your egg inside. You may need to reposition your herb once your egg's in the stocking. Once everything's in place, pull the stocking up as tight as you can. Make sure pull the stocking up tight. Keep a finger on your herb. Then, same way we did before, we'll make a knot by tying it around our finger. Pulling it off and shoving the other end inside. And then pull tight. Make sure it's tight against the egg so that the herb or flour, whatever you use, doesn't drift away while it's in the dye. Make sure to smooth out any wrinkles best you can. And once you're happy, it's good to go. Once your eggs are decorated and your dye is cool enough to use, we will add the vinegar. The vinegar will help combine the dye with the eggshells. You will need 1 tablespoon of vinegar for every cup of dye you have. For most of mine, I have 2 cups of dye, so I'll use 2 tablespoons of vinegar. Once your vinegar has been added, stir it into the dye. Once everything is ready, it's time to add the eggs to the dye. Place them into the containers very gently so you don't crack the eggshells. I found using a spoon helped, especially with the deeper containers. Once your eggs are in the dye, place the containers into the fridge to help the dye set. How long you leave the eggs in the dye will depend on how dark you want the color to be. You can leave them from anywhere to 5 hours up to 24 hours. Check on them frequently to see how dark they have gotten and if you're happy with the color. I'm leaving mine in our fridge for overnight, so I'll check on these guys in the morning. It's now the next day, and my eggs should be ready. Before you take your eggs out of the dye, place some paper towel underneath a cooling rack. We will use this to place the eggs to let them dry, and the paper towel will catch any extra dye that drips off the eggs. Take your eggs out of the dye the same way you put them in, very carefully. Use a spoon to help you fish out the eggs and gently place them on the cooling rack to dry. Once your eggs have had the chance to dry, move them over to a display plate. This is also a good time to remove your elastics and stockings. So we're going to start with the elastics. That turned out very cool. Now the ones with elastics might still be a little wet, so you can give them a little bit more of a chance to dry. I'm just going to let that one sit there for a little bit longer. It was a bit wet. To remove the stockings, start with this one. Pull up a little bit underneath one of the knots, grab a pair of scissors, and carefully open it up. Move your stocking, and you can peel back your herb and see how well the imprint did. The eggs and the stockings will still be wet, so those ones will need a little extra time to dry. Once your eggs have finished drying, you can set them out for display on a fancy plate or enjoy them for Sunday brunch. Thank you all so much for joining me on this week's Take and Make. The written instructions for this project can be found in the video description below. If you enjoyed this and want to show off your work, be sure to tag the library on your social media posts. I hope you can all join us for our next Take and Make, but until then, take care and happy spring!